I saw a strange man dance with my wife at the company party. At first, I thought it was just a coworker, maybe an acquaintance I didn't remember, but then he whispered something in her ear and laughed. Her eyes sparkled in a way they hadn't sparkled for me in years. My fingers tightened around the glass in my hand, the ice cracking under the pressure of my fingers. But it was when he said those words that the ground seemed to disappear beneath my feet. I love you. I felt my body act before I even thought. I walked through the crowd, pushed chairs and hit some people who were in the way. My blood boiled, my mind emptied of any rational thought. I pulled that man by his shirt with all the strength I had and growled through my teeth, my voice filled with raw anger that burned me inside. What are you doing to my wife? His eyes showed no fear, there wasn't even a trace of guilt. And then, before he could even respond, my wife placed her hand on my arm and said something that made time freeze around me. This is the man I truly love. The entire hall seemed to go silent. The lights became brighter, blinding me. The sound of the party became a distant hum as the truth hit me like a sledgehammer in the chest. My heart was beating so hard I could hear the blood ringing in my ears. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. That wasn't real. It couldn't be. Are you kidding me? My voice was lower than I expected, but still filled with disbelief. She hesitated, her eyes watery, but not with regret. Not of guilt. Not out of fear of losing myself. But with excitement to be close to him. As if I wasn't there. As if the years by my side had meant absolutely nothing. Get out of my life with him. But custody of our children is already mine. Despair crossed his face like a sudden wave, but it was too late. I didn't need to hear anything else. She had already made her choice. The woman I loved, who I built a life for, who once looked at me with admiration, now looked at another man with the same passionate eyes that had once been mine. But what she didn't know was that this betrayal would not go unpunished. That every choice has a consequence. And that the price of your betrayal would not just be my pain, but something much greater. Something she could never predict. She thought she would find the love of her life, but ended up losing much more than she expected. And what happened after that night, no one could have imagined. Welcome to the channel. Here, we do not support any type of betrayal. All the stories are fictional, but they carry a brutal truth. Betrayal destroys lives, corrodes bonds and leaves deep scars. Our goal is to show the overwhelming consequences of wrong choices and how nothing goes unpunished. Get ready, because what you're going to hear now is a shocking, intense story full of twists and turns. Take a deep breath, and let's get started. The room was impeccable, lit by golden chandeliers that cast sparkling reflections on the elegantly arranged tables. The night was one of celebration. It was the company's annual party, an event always awaited, where employees could relax, toast achievements and indulge in a night of fun. Among the guests, a couple stood out. Not because of their extravagance, but because of the way they seemed so in sync, so sure of each other, as if they were born to share this journey. Liam and Sophie had been married for 10 years. He, a man with a striking presence, intense gaze and an always attentive expression. He had worked at the company longer than anyone there and had earned respect not only for his performance, but for his integrity. For many, he was the ideal professional, the type of man who never wavered in the face of challenges. To Sophie, he was more than that. He was her partner, her companion, the man with whom she built a life, a family. She, in turn, was a sophisticated woman, with delicate gestures and a smile that seemed to light up any room. Always so charming, always so well aligned, always so careful with words and gestures. Sophie knew how to carry herself, how to carry on a conversation, how to be captivating. At work, she was seen as an example of professionalism, someone who inspired admiration. But what made her even more special was the way she seemed to be a devoted wife and mother, someone who balanced her life perfectly without ever neglecting her family. That night, Liam held a glass of wine and watched Sophie from afar. She looked beautiful, as always. The red dress she wore hugged her body just right, her perfectly aligned hair fell over her shoulders, and her perfume filled the air around her. He felt his chest swell with pride. 10 years of marriage, 2 children, a comfortable home, a life that many would envy. And yet, every time he looked at her, he felt the same awe he felt that first day. Liam approached her, passing his hand on her waist in a natural way, like someone who already knows that body, who has shared countless intimate moments, who has a home there. Sophie smiled at him and placed her hand over his, her eyes expressing something he couldn't decipher at that moment. The night continued with toasts, laughter and music. It was a light, relaxed atmosphere. Sophie danced a few times, chatted with colleagues, and Liam remained by her side, greeting friends and directors. For a moment, he stepped aside to talk to one of his superiors about a new project. When he returned, he noticed Sophie was on the dance floor, twirling under the lights, her eyes shining with excitement. He smiled seeing her so happy. But soon her gaze fixed on the male figure beside her. It was a man he didn't recognize. Tall, well-dressed, he seemed too comfortable there, next to her. They talked, laughed. His hand rested gently on Sophie's waist. It wasn't an obvious touch, but it wasn't insignificant either. Something inside Liam made him frown. He knew all of Sophie's co-workers, and this man was not part of the circle. Sophie seemed too involved in that conversation. His gestures were loose, his laughter easy. Liam felt something strange in his chest. It wasn't jealousy. It was uncomfortable, a restlessness that he couldn't define. Before he could react, one of his friends approached and lightly slapped him on the shoulder, pulling him back to the conversation that had been interrupted. The party continued to be lively, but Liam couldn't get rid of the uncomfortable feeling that haunted him. He loved Sophie, he trusted her, but something about that interaction felt out of place. Why hadn't she introduced him? Why did she act as if she were in another world, completely immersed in that conversation? He tried to push away the thoughts. Maybe he was exaggerating. After all, Sophie was always sociable, she always had this lightness when dealing with people. But something, deep down, insisted on telling him that that night wouldn't end the way he expected. He pulled away to breathe. He went to the bar and poured himself another glass of wine. He observed the full room, people smiling, enjoying the night. He tried to rationalize what he felt. But something inside him already knew that, from that night on, nothing would be the same again. That night marked the beginning of something that Liam still couldn't completely define, but that was already pulsing inside him like an uncomfortable presence. In the days following the party, he tried to ignore that feeling, he tried to continue with his routine, but the image of Sophie dancing with that unknown man haunted him obsessively. He tried to convince himself that he was just a coworker, someone irrelevant, but something inside him screamed that there was more there, that this wasn't just a chance meeting between 2 acquaintances. Sophie looked the same. The same habits, the same calculated gestures, the same way of smiling when asked about your day. But Liam noticed something was different. Small details, subtleties that had never caught his attention before now seemed evident. She took longer to respond to messages, started leaving the room to answer calls, and whenever he approached, she would hastily hang up or change the subject. Liam's intuition began to take shape. Fear gave way to doubt and, finally, to the certainty that something was being hidden from him. He tried to rationalize, tried to look for logical explanations, but the more he observed, the more evident it became that Sophie was no longer the same. Or perhaps, he thought in a moment of bitter realization, she had never been who he believed her to be. One night, she went out saying she was meeting some friends. Liam wouldn't be suspicious if it weren't for the fact that, in recent times, those outings had become more frequent, always justified with hasty excuses. Something inside him broke when he saw that, instead of taking the car as she always did, she called a private driver, checking her cell phone several times before walking out the door with a sparkle in her eyes that he hadn't seen in a long time. He waited a few minutes, took his car keys and followed the same path. He hadn't planned on doing that, but now that he was on the road, he realized he needed the truth, no matter what the cost. Her car stopped in a more distant neighborhood, a discreet street where few people passed by. He parked at a safe distance and saw her get out of the vehicle in a hurry. He walked along the sidewalk with hurried steps until he reached the entrance of a sophisticated building. He didn't hesitate when ringing the intercom, and seconds later, the door opened. Liam remained in the car, motionless, feeling anger and anguish mix in his chest. The doubt dissipated with overwhelming brutality. The man who greeted her at the door was neither a coworker nor an old friend. It was that same stranger from the party, the one who had made her shine in a way he no longer could. He tried to convince himself that it wasn't what it seemed, he tried to find another explanation, but the minutes passed and Sophie didn't come out. Time advanced and, with it, the hope of being wrong disappeared. When dawn arrived and she still hadn't left, Liam knew he didn't need any more proof. The pain came like a blow, a sharp blade piercing his chest. He felt his stomach drop, his hands shaking on the steering wheel. I wanted to scream, I wanted to break down the door of that building and pull her out, I wanted to ask her how she had the courage. But instead, he stood there, standing still, watching the ruin of everything he once believed to be true. When Sophie finally left, it was almost morning. The satisfied smile on her face made him want to close his eyes, pretend he hadn't seen anything. But he could no longer be mistaken. She ran her hand through her hair, straightened her dress and walked slowly to the car that was already waiting for her. Liam didn't follow her. There was nothing else to go on. The truth was there, raw, undeniable. He took a deep breath, trying to contain the lump that was forming in his throat. The woman he loved had chosen someone else. But what she didn't know was that betrayal would not go without consequences. And Liam was about to make sure of that. The anger Liam felt that night was not temporary. She grew inside him, feeding on every detail, every memory, every laugh Sophie shared on the phone while pretending they were still a happy couple. He didn't say anything for the first few days, he let her believe her secret was safe. But the pain was eating away at him, and he knew he couldn't keep pretending. Not after seeing it with your own eyes. That morning, Sophie was getting ready as if nothing had happened. The mirror reflected his serene face, without a trace of guilt. Liam watched her from the doorway, his arms crossed, his mind working on a plan that was about to be put into practice. He took a deep breath before releasing the words that would change everything. I know where you were the other night. Sophie paused for a second, but then continued adjusting the necklace. His reflection remained impassive, showing no surprise. What are you talking about? Liam took a step forward, his hands balling into fists at his sides. You don't have to lie. I saw. I followed you. I know exactly what you did. This time, Sophie remained still. Her hand stopped at the zipper of her dress, and for a brief moment, he saw something in her eyes that might have been regret. But it was soon replaced by something worse. Coldness. And what do you want me to say? The question hit him harder than anything else. There was no denial, there was no pleading, there was no blame. Just an arrogant acceptance, as if there was nothing there that could be discussed. He felt his anger grow, his chest rise and fall with heavy breathing. I want to know why. I want to know how you had courage. Sophie closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and then turned to face him directly. Liam, things between us haven't been good for a long time. You know that. He laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. I didn't know that meant you had the right to cheat on me. I didn't know that instead of solving our problems, you preferred to find a stranger to solve them for you. Sophie crossed her arms, and for the first time, her eyes reflected something like discomfort. I didn't want it to be like this, but it happened. You can scream, you can hate me, but it doesn't change anything. Liam ran his hands over his face, trying to contain the storm inside him. Doesn't it change anything? Sophie, we have a life together. We have children. And you just threw it all away. She looked away. The silence between them was heavy, suffocating. Then Liam realized something. She wasn't surprised. There was no fear of being discovered. And that could only mean one thing. You already knew I would find out, didn't you? Sophie didn't respond. Liam felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. You don't care. You wanted me to know. Sophie finally looked him in the eyes, and there was the truth he didn't want to face. I was going to tell you. But not like this. The fury returned with more force, like a devastating wave. Not like that. So in what way, Sophie? How did you plan to destroy me? She sighed, ran a hand through her hair and, finally, released something that Liam could never imagine. I wasn't going to tell you because I don't need to. You already lost, Liam. He frowned. Missed what? She took a step forward, her gaze now filled with something he couldn't decipher. Your job. The words echoed in the air, but it took a few seconds for them to make sense. What? Sophie smiled. The man you saw me with, he's not just someone I knew. He is the new director of the company. The man who will decide who stays and who goes. And do you know what he told me? That it would be better for the company if you were no longer part of it. Liam felt a chill run down his spine. You're joking. I'm not. The penny dropped at once. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the final blow. Did you help him destroy me? Sophie kept her gaze steady. I did what was necessary. Liam felt the weight of the world crashing down on him. Marriage, love, respect, everything had been crushed at once. It wasn't just the loss of Sophie. It was the loss of everything. He didn't say anything else. He just turned and left. Because at that moment, he knew that the war was just beginning. Liam left the house without looking back. The cold morning air seemed to cut into his skin, but nothing hurt more than the truth he had just heard. It wasn't just Sophie's betrayal, it wasn't just the fact that she chose another man. It was the final blow, the meticulously planned destruction of everything he had built. Losing his marriage was already a cruel blow, but losing his job, his stability, his professional dignity at the hands of the one who was supposed to be his partner, this was something he could never have imagined. He drove aimlessly, not knowing exactly where to go. His mind was spinning, heavy, full of questions he couldn't answer. How did you not notice before? How did you allow this to happen? Sophie wasn't just unfaithful. She was cold, calculating. She knew all along what she was doing. While he worried about his family, his children, his future, she had already charted a path where he no longer had space. He stopped the car in an empty parking lot and rested his head on the steering wheel. His chest rose and fell rapidly, trying to contain the storm within him. There was anger, yes. But there was also something worse. There was a feeling that everything he built had no meaning. He always believed that life was an exchange, that loyalty generated loyalty, that love was a commitment. But Sophie proved that none of that was true. The phone rang next to him, snapping him out of his daze. He looked at the display and saw the name of one of the company's directors. He already knew what it was. He answered with a cold, emotionless voice. Liam, we need to talk. Can you stop by the company? The tone was dry, direct. Without beating around the bush. He sighed, squinting his eyes for a moment before responding. I am going. He drove slowly, already anticipating what was coming. Upon arriving, he took the elevator without looking around, ignoring the looks of his colleagues who knew more than they should. When he entered the meeting room, 3 directors were sitting at the table, and the new boss, the man who had taken his wife, was at the head. The silence was piercing. Liam, I hope you understand that this is not personal. He smiled, a cynical, humorless smile. Of course it isn't. The boss cleared his throat, trying to maintain a professional demeanor. The company is going through some changes, and its position unfortunately no longer fits into the new structure. Liam crossed his arms, feeling his blood boil. Right. So let's skip this rehearsed conversation. This has nothing to do with changes. This has to do with the fact that you are sleeping with my wife. The man adjusted his tie uncomfortably. The other directors exchanged glances, uneasily. Liam, please, let's not make this personal. He laughed, but this time, it was a dark laugh. You destroyed my family and now you destroy my career. Tell me, what more do you want? My house? My children? Do you want to steal everything at once or do you prefer to savor it little by little? The boss did not respond immediately. He adjusted the papers in front of him before continuing. You will receive a generous severance package. You don't need to worry about money. We just want to avoid any unpleasant situations. Liam was silent for a moment, letting the words sink in. That was it. A man who destroyed his life was now trying to buy his dignity with a check. He leaned forward, looking straight into the other's eyes. Money was never the problem. But you are. Without another word, he got up and left the room. The corridor seemed too long, the faces that faced him seemed like unimportant figures. Nothing else mattered. He had lost everything. But at the same time, something inside him lit up. A spark. An idea. Sophie thought she had one. Who had taken from him everything he could. But she didn't know who she was dealing with. Liam wouldn't be erased so easily. He was not a man who accepted defeat without a fight. Did she want to play this game? Very good. But he was about to change the rules. He wouldn't just get back what he lost. He would take back every piece of the life she tried to destroy. And when the time came, Sophie would realize that betrayal had a price. And that he would be the one who would charge every last penny. Liam left the company building with his head held high, but inside he felt a suffocating emptiness. It wasn't just Sophie's betrayal, or even the fact of losing her job. It was the way it all happened, the way he was discarded without hesitation. As if it were nothing. As if your dedication, your love, your loyalty had been worth absolutely nothing. The cold wind bit his face as he walked to his car. He got behind the wheel and stayed there for a moment, breathing deeply. The anger still burned inside him, but now it was accompanied by something more. Determination. Sophie thought she had one. He thought he could just erase everything he built and go on with his life as if he had never existed. But she was wrong. He took out his cell phone and dialed a number. The voice on the other end answered almost immediately. I need to talk to you. Now. The meeting was scheduled in a discreet cafe, away from the curious eyes that were certainly already commenting on everything that had happened that morning. When he arrived, he saw Noah sitting at a table in the corner, a worried look on his face. Noah was his best friend since college, one of the few he trusted. Liam sat down, rested his elbows on the table and let out a heavy sigh. She did it, Noah. It completely destroyed me. Noah frowned, crossing his arms. I saw the rumors going around. Tell me it's not true. It's worse than you imagine. Liam told everything. The betrayal, the dismissal, the plan that Sophie and that man had hatched against him. Noah listened silently, but the anger in his eyes was evident. That's unbelievable. You spent years dedicating yourself to that company. That guy comes in, steals your wife and still does this to you. You can't let it go cheaply. Liam gripped his coffee cup tightly. I won't let you. But I can't act without thinking. I lost everything, Noah. My career, my family, my children. Noah nodded slowly, choosing his words carefully. Do they know? Liam shook his head. Not yet. I need to find a way to tell them. They're children, they don't deserve to be dragged into this filth. But sooner or later, Sophie will try to use them against me. The friend was silent for a moment, then leaned forward. You want my honest opinion? Don't try to attack directly. Sophie is already waiting for you to do something. You need to be smarter than her. Liam rubbed his face, feeling the weight of exhaustion. And what do you suggest? Noah smirked. Start again. Reinvent yourself. Do something that shows they didn't destroy you. Nothing hurts someone like that more than seeing the person they tried to destroy come back stronger. Liam was silent, processing those words. Something inside him lit up. He knew Noah was right. Over the next few days, he stood his ground. He gathered contacts, talked to old colleagues, and started planning a new path. But the hardest part was yet to come. He went to the house where he lived, where Sophie still was, where his children slept. When he opened the door, he found her sitting on the sofa, her expression impassive. Do you still have the key? She raised an eyebrow. Liam closed the door behind him, keeping his posture firm. I didn't come to discuss this. I want to see the children. Sophie sighed, crossing her legs slowly. And you think you can just come in here and demand this? He kept his gaze fixed on her. I'm their father. And nothing you do will change that. For a moment, Sophie seemed about to respond, but then a noise from the stairs interrupted them. The two little ones were there, their eyes sleepy. Wow. Liam's heart sank. He bent down and opened his arms, and without hesitation, the two ran towards him. Sophie watched the scene without saying anything. I want to take them to spend the day with me. She laughed humorlessly. And why would I allow that? Liam looked at her, the tone of his voice calm, but filled with something deeper. Because you know that if you try to stop me, I will fight to the end. And no matter what you did, the court would never take away my custody. She hesitated for a moment, then let out a theatrical sigh. Do whatever you want. But remember, Liam, I'm still their mother. Don't try to put ideas into their heads. He didn't respond. He took his children by the hand and left. That day, he took them for a walk, to a park they used to go to when they were younger. He saw in their eyes the innocence of someone who still didn't fully understand what was happening. But they would soon understand. Noah was right. He needed to get back on his feet. And he would do that. But not for revenge. He would do it for himself. And more than that. He would make sure Sophie never forgot that he was not a man who allowed himself to be destroyed. The months passed like a dense fog that slowly dissipated, revealing a new reality for everyone involved. Liam didn't allow himself to sink into despair, despite all the losses he suffered. He used every fragment of pain as fuel to rebuild himself, to prove that he would not be a victim of betrayal, but rather the architect of his own redemption. He moved away from everything that tied him to the past, found partners willing to invest in his talent and intelligence, and little by little he built his own company. Unlike the old days, now he didn't need to bow to anyone, he didn't answer to a boss, and most importantly, he didn't work for someone who could betray him behind his back. At first, the path was arduous. I slept little, I worked harder than ever, but each advance, each achievement, was a personal victory. Before long, his name was mentioned in the market again, and those who tried to overthrow him began to realize that they had underestimated him. Meanwhile, Sophie lived a reality completely different from the one she imagined. At first, she felt victorious. I thought I had freed myself from the weight of a marriage that I thought was lifeless, that I had gained new love and financial stability with an influential man. But the truth was that what seemed like a triumph began to unravel little by little. The man she had left her husband for was nothing like she expected. At first he was charming, attentive, promising. But as time passed, Sophie realized that she was just another one for him, like so many others before. He wasn't loyal, he wasn't dedicated. And above all, I didn't see her as someone special. She had become an ornament, an empty achievement. And what's worse, without Liam by her side, without the respect that came with her old marriage, she realized that she no longer had control over anything. The company where she was previously respected now saw her with different eyes. The same man who promised to protect her, who convinced her they would be together, was the first to dismiss her opinion in meetings. Gradually, she realized that her influence was fading. She was removed from important decisions, her presence was no longer indispensable. And then came the final blow. The man she destroyed everything for has found another woman. Younger, more ambitious. And Sophie was discarded like an object that had lost its luster. When she realized, she no longer had a job, she no longer had a man to support her, and above all, she had lost the only one who really cared about her. She tried to get back to Liam, tried to rescue something from the life she destroyed with her own hands. But when he looked for him, he realized that there was no more space for his presence. He was already on another level. Now he owned his own company, admired in the market, stronger than ever. She saw him in the distance, talking to a woman she had never seen before. Young, beautiful, but above all, with a sparkle in her eyes when she looked at him. A shine that she herself lost. He tried to get closer, tried to retrieve something, but it was too late. Liam had already moved on. He just looked at her indifferently, as if the past was just a distant shadow that no longer mattered. Her children, once an unbreakable bond between her and Liam, also began to drift away. They realized what happened, they understood their mother's choice. And little by little, they began to see their father as the pillar of stability. Sophie, now alone, saw her life fall apart. Without a family, without a husband, without the career she believed to be secure. Liam won. Not because he sought revenge, but because he didn't allow the betrayal to define him. He got back on his feet, built a solid future, found a new love, and most importantly, became an even more present father to his children. His name, once linked to scandal and humiliation, was now synonymous with success. He didn't need to destroy Sophie. She did it herself, with her own decisions. Now it's your turn to comment. What did you think of this story? Do you think Sophie got what she deserved? If you liked the story, subscribe to the channel for more impactful stories like this. And remember, this channel does not support cheating of any kind. Betrayal always has a price. And in the end, no one comes out unscathed.